Welcome to our exploration of some of history's most tragic maritime disasters. Across the vast and unforgiving oceans, countless ships have met their untimely ends, leaving behind stories of bravery, hubris, and heart-wrenching loss. Today, we journey through time to uncover the harrowing tales of 10 ill-fated vessels, each a monumental chapter in the annals of maritime history. From the opulent decks of the RMS Titanic to the crowded corridors of the MV Doña Paz, these ships, once symbols of human ingenuity and ambition, became somber reminders of the ocean's relentless power. Join us as we delve into these stories, seeking to understand the events that led to their tragic demises and honoring the memories of those who were lost to the deep. List of disasters covered: 1. The Unsinkable Legend's Final Voyage 1. A Modern Leviathan's Agony 1. Innocence Lost in the Yellow Sea 4. The Estonia's Demise 1. The Ocean's Bleeding Wound 1. The Doña Paz Tragedy 1. The Elegant Swan's Last Dance 8. The Lusitania's Fate 9. The Joola's Agony 1. The Bukoba. Our first account takes us back to a gilded age, an era of unprecedented technological advancement and boundless optimism. Here she was born the RMS Titanic, a veritable floating palace, the largest ship afloat at the time of her maiden voyage, and heralded with a confidence that now seems so tragically misplaced as unsinkable. She was the embodiment of luxury, of engineering prowess, a magnificent testament to mankind's ambition to conquer the very oceans. Her departure from Southampton in April 1912, an event captured in numerous photographs and early newsreels, was met with fanfare, carrying aboard a microcosm of society, from the fabulously wealthy in their opulent suites to the hopeful emigrants in steerage, all dreaming of a new life across the Atlantic. The initial days of her voyage across the North Atlantic were, by all accounts, remarkably smooth, the great liner gliding through calm seas under starlit nights, as some surviving passenger diaries later recalled. Passengers revelled in the unparalleled comfort and grandeur, unaware of the silent, colossal threat that lay in wait, drifting south from the Arctic. Warnings of icebergs in the shipping lanes had been received, documented, in telegraph messages that would later be scrutinized intensely, yet the Titanic, under pressure to make a swift passage, maintained a considerable speed. The vastness of the ocean, often a source of wonder, concealed in its dark, frigid waters the instrument of her undoing, a silent, patient predator of ice, its scale only to be imagined from the few blurry photographs taken by passing ships of other icebergs in the area. Then, on the fateful night of April 14th, the serene journey was shattered. A lookout's urgent cry, "Iceberg right ahead," pierced the cold night air. Despite desperate maneuvers, the colossal liner, with its immense momentum, could not entirely avoid the frozen monolith. The impact itself was described by some survivors as almost deceptively gentle, a mere shudder, yet below the waterline the damage was catastrophic. The iceberg, unseen in the darkness but for its ghostly white peak, had gashed a series of holes along the starboard hull, breaching 5 of her 16 watertight compartments, one more than she could withstand and remain afloat. Contemporary illustrations based on survivor accounts would attempt to depict this unseen, fatal wounding. The realization of the true extent of the peril dawned slowly, then with horrifying speed. The Unsinkable was indeed sinking. The subsequent hours were a maelstrom of dawning horror, desperate courage, and heartbreaking choices, all played out under a star-strewn sky that offered no solace. The ship, designed to be a beacon of safety, possessed lifeboats for only a fraction of her complement, a stark testament to the hubris of her creators. The launch of these boats, captured in the haunting memories of survivors and later in poignant photographs of the few rescued, was often chaotic, with the women and children first protocol leading to heart-wrenching separations as families were torn apart on the tilting decks amidst the rising icy water. The final moments, as captured in survivor testimonies and later depicted in countless images, illustrations, and eventually haunting underwater footage of the wreck itself, paint a scene of almost unimaginable terror and poignant dignity. As the bow plunged deeper, the stern rose high into the air, its lights flickering before extinguishing into eternal darkness. The mighty ship broke apart, her magnificent form succumbing to the relentless pull of the abyss. Over 1,500 souls perished in the freezing waters, their cries for help eventually fading into an awful silence. The Titanic's demise, documented in stark newspaper headlines worldwide, became an enduring symbol of disaster, a stark lesson in the perils of overconfidence, and a tragedy forever seared into the annals of maritime history. We now leap forward a century to January 2012, off the picturesque coast of Tuscany, Italy. Here the cruise ship Costa Concordia, a modern behemoth of leisure and luxury, embarked on what should have been a routine Mediterranean voyage. She was a floating city equipped with every imaginable amenity, carrying over 4,000 souls, passengers and crew, all anticipating pleasure and relaxation. The calm Tyrrhenian Sea, illuminated by the lights of the nearby island of Giglio, seemed to promise nothing but tranquility. Yet a catastrophic deviation from her planned course would soon transform this idyllic scene into one of chaos and disbelief, all captured vividly by the ubiquitous cameras of the modern age. The disaster unfolded with shocking speed. In a move later deemed reckless, the ship sailed dangerously close to the island's shore, ostensibly to perform a salute. It was here in the shallow rock-strewn waters that the Costa Concordia struck an underwater reef. The impact tore a massive gash some 50 meters long in her portside hull. Water began to pour into the engine rooms, crippling the ship's power and propulsion. Passengers, many enjoying dinner or evening entertainment, felt a sudden, violent jolt, followed by an unnerving blackout. The initial announcements from the crew, downplaying the severity of the situation, only added to the growing confusion and anxiety as smartphone cameras began to roll, capturing the dawning unease. What followed was a slow, agonizing capsize played out in the glare of the world's media. Astonishing footage, much of it filmed by passengers themselves, showed tilting corridors, sliding furniture, and the increasingly desperate attempts to launch lifeboats from a vessel listing at an ever more precarious angle. The ship, a vibrant hub of activity mere hours before, was now a stricken giant, groaning under the stress as it slowly keeled over onto its starboard side in the shallow waters. The lights of Giglio, once a scenic backdrop, now illuminated a scene of unfolding tragedy, with rescue helicopters and boats rushing towards the stricken liner. The evacuation was fraught with difficulty and tragically marred by delays and disorganization. While many crew members acted heroically, guiding passengers to safety, the sheer scale of the list made many lifeboat stations unusable. Some individuals were forced to climb across the exposed hull of the ship, while others, in the darkness and panic, fell or jumped into the cold sea. The dramatic rescue operations, captured by news crews and amateur videographers alike, continued for hours, a desperate race against time as the massive vessel settled into its final ignominious resting place, half submerged just meters from the shore. 32 lives were tragically lost in the Costa Concordia disaster, a modern maritime catastrophe that stunned the world with its stark visual record. The images of the colossal cruise ship lying on its side like a beached whale became iconic, a symbol of human error and its devastating consequences. The subsequent salvage operation, an unprecedented feat of engineering, was itself a spectacle, meticulously documented. But it is the human cost, the terror experienced by those aboard, and the haunting footage of their ordeal that remains the most powerful legacy of this wholly avoidable tragedy. A stark reminder that even in our age of advanced technology, the sea demands unwavering respect and responsibility. Our journey now takes us to the waters off the southwestern coast of South Korea in April 2014, where a tragedy of heartbreaking proportions unfolded. The ferry MV Sewol was en route to the popular resort island of Jeju, carrying 476 passengers and crew. Crucially, the vast majority of those on board were high school students embarking on an exciting field trip, their youthful exuberance and anticipation soon to be extinguished by a catastrophic chain of events. The journey began under fair skies, but an ill-fated maneuver would lead the vessel and so many of its young occupants into the unforgiving embrace of the Yellow Sea. The Sewol, heavily laden and, as investigations would later reveal, with its stability compromised by improper cargo stowage and modifications, made a sharp, sudden turn. This maneuver caused the poorly secured cargo to shift, destabilizing the vessel to a critical degree. The ferry began to list, slowly at first, then with increasing and alarming rapidity. Initial footage from on board, captured on the mobile phones of the students themselves, shows a calm bewilderment gradually turning to fear. Tragically, repeated announcements instructed passengers, especially the students, to stay in their cabins, advice that would prove fatal for so many. As the seawall tilted further, chaos erupted. The angle of the list made escape incredibly difficult, transforming familiar corridors and stairwells into treacherous, almost impassable obstacles. Water began to flood the lower decks, trapping hundreds. Heart-wrenching video messages and texts sent by students to their loved ones during these terrifying moments provide a devastating, intimate record of their fear and their final goodbyes. Outside, fishing boats and Coast Guard vessels rushed to the scene, but the ferry was succumbing quickly, its plight broadcast live to a horrified nation. The rescue efforts, while valiant in many instances, were widely criticized for being slow and disorganized in the initial crucial stages. Images of the ferry, nearly fully submerged with only its bulbous bow visible above the waves, became a national symbol of grief and anger. Divers faced perilous conditions attempting to reach those trapped inside, but for too many, help arrived too late. The sinking of the MV Sewol claimed over 300 lives, the vast majority of them schoolchildren whose bright futures were so cruelly cut short. The visual evidence, from the shaky phone footage within to the professional news coverage without, painted an undeniable picture of systemic failures. The aftermath of the Sewol disaster was one of profound national mourning and outrage in South Korea. The haunting images of unclaimed school uniforms, the tearful vigils, and the faces of grieving parents dominated the media for months. Investigations revealed a litany of safety violations, regulatory failures, and questionable conduct by some crew members, including the captain, who was among the first to be rescued. The Sewol's sinking is not just a maritime disaster, it is a searing indictment of negligence. A painful lesson captured on camera, reminding us of the sacred responsibility to protect the most vulnerable, especially when they are entrusted to our care upon the waters. Chapter 4. We turn now to the frigid, often tempestuous waters of the Baltic Sea and to a disaster that sent shockwaves across northern Europe, the sinking of the MS Estonia in September 1994. This large roll-on/roll-off ferry was on a routine overnight crossing from Tallinn, Estonia to Stockholm, Sweden, carrying nearly 1,000 souls, passengers and crew, into the teeth of a fierce autumn storm. The Estonia was a modern vessel, a symbol of the newly regained independence of the Baltic states and, for many, a vital link between East and West. But on this night, the formidable power of nature would prove overwhelming. As the Estonia battled heavy seas and gale-force winds, a catastrophic failure occurred at the bow of the ship. The bow visor, a crucial component that opened to allow vehicles onto the car deck, was torn away by the force of the relentless waves. This sudden critical breach allowed enormous quantities of water to surge directly onto the vehicle deck, a vast open space that once flooded would rapidly and disastrously compromise the ship's stability. The initial signs of trouble were subtle, unusual noises, a slight list, but events quickly escalated into a fight for survival in the pitch-black, storm-tossed night. The loss of stability was terrifyingly swift. Within minutes, the Estonia developed a severe list to starboard, making movement almost impossible and rendering many life-saving appliances inaccessible or unusable. Alarms blared, but the immediate chaos and the extreme angle of the vessel meant that organized evacuation procedures largely collapsed. Passengers and crew were thrown from their bunks, struggling to navigate tilting, darkened corridors as furniture and fittings crashed around them. The few distress calls that managed to get out painted a desperate picture, but the speed of the capsize was faster than any effective response could be mounted. Tragically, the MS Estonia sank in less than an hour, disappearing beneath the waves in one of the deadliest peacetime maritime disasters of the 20th century in European waters. The storm conditions severely hampered rescue efforts. Helicopters battled ferocious winds, and ships arriving at the scene found a horrifying tableau of debris and a few life rafts tossed on mountainous seas. The water temperature was perilously cold, meaning survival times for anyone in the water were brutally short. Early news reports, often accompanied by grainy images of the storm and later sparse photos of survivors, struggled to convey the sheer horror of the event. Over 850 lives were lost that night, a staggering toll that plunged Estonia, Sweden and Finland into deep mourning. The wreck of the Estonia, lying in international waters, became the subject of intense debate and numerous investigations, with official reports citing the failure of the bow visor lockings as the primary cause. However, controversy and alternative theories have persisted for years. The few photographs and limited video from the immediate aftermath, along with later underwater surveys of the wreck, serve as a somber archive of a night when the Baltic Sea showed its most merciless face, leaving an indelible scar on the collective memory of the region. Chapter 5. Our focus now shifts from the immediate loss of human life in a singular event to a disaster of a different, yet equally profound, magnitude. The Deepwater Horizon oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, April 2010. This was not a sinking in the traditional sense, but rather the catastrophic failure of an advanced deep-sea drilling rig, leading to an environmental catastrophe whose repercussions are still being felt. The Deepwater Horizon, a marvel of modern engineering, was engaged in exploratory drilling miles beneath the ocean surface, a testament to humanity's relentless quest for energy resources. The disaster began with a series of wellhead failures, leading to a massive blowout of natural gas, which then ignited. The ensuing explosions and fire engulfed the rig, a terrifying spectacle captured by nearby vessels and news helicopters. 11 crew members tragically lost their lives in the inferno, their sacrifice a prelude to the environmental devastation that was to follow. For nearly 3 agonizing days, the rig burned, a colossal pyre in the vastness of the Gulf, before finally succumbing and sinking beneath the waves, leaving behind a scene of wreckage and ominously the beginning of an uncontrolled oil discharge. With the rig gone, the full horror of the situation began to emerge. Crude oil began to gush, unchecked, from the damaged wellhead nearly a mile below the surface. This was the start of the largest marine oil spill in history. Day after day, week after week, month after month, millions of barrels of oil spewed into the delicate ecosystem of the Gulf. Live underwater camera feeds, known as the spill cam, broadcast haunting, relentless images of the black plume billowing from the seabed, a stark visual testament to the unfolding environmental crisis that gripped the attention of a horrified global audience. The efforts to contain and cap the well were immense. A desperate high-stakes battle against immense subsea pressures and technological challenges, all played out under intense public and media scrutiny. Numerous attempts, from containment domes to top kill procedures, failed or met with only partial success, each setback deepening the sense of crisis. Meanwhile, on the surface, the spreading oil slick threatened coastlines across several states, devastating fishing grounds, fragile marshlands, and marine wildlife. Heartbreaking images of oil-soaked birds and dolphins became emblematic of the spill's devastating impact on the natural world. Eventually, after 87 agonizing days, the well was capped and then permanently sealed. But the environmental damage was extensive and long-lasting. The Deepwater Horizon disaster, documented extensively through news footage, scientific monitoring, and the unforgettable spill cam, served as a brutal reminder of the risks inherent in deep-water oil exploration and the profound vulnerability of marine ecosystems to human industrial activity. It highlighted the immense difficulty of responding to such deep-sea accidents and sparked a global debate about energy policy and environmental stewardship. Its visual legacy a constant call for greater caution and accountability. Chapter 6. We now journey to the Philippines, to December 1987, and to a disaster that holds the grim distinction of being the deadliest peacetime maritime tragedy in history. The collision of the passenger ferry MV Doña Paz with the oil tanker MT Vector. The Doña Paz was severely overcrowded, carrying thousands of passengers, many of whom were unlisted, heading home for the Christmas holidays. The vessel, originally built in Japan, was navigating the Tablas Strait, a busy shipping lane, in conditions of relative calm, yet an unimaginable horror was about to unfold in the darkness. In the dead of night, the Doña Paz collided with the MT Vector, which was carrying a full cargo of gasoline and other petroleum products. The exact circumstances leading to the collision remain shrouded in some uncertainty, with reports suggesting that perhaps only one apprentice was on the bridge of the Doña Paz at the time. The impact itself was devastating, but it was the instantaneous inferno that followed which sealed the fate of so many. The Vector's cargo ignited, engulfing both ships in a massive fireball, turning the surrounding sea into a blazing cauldron. The scene, as described by the handful of survivors, was one of pure, unadulterated hell. Panic erupted on the Doña Paz as flames spread with terrifying speed across the decks, fueled by the spilled petroleum. Many passengers were asleep and were awakened by the crash and the rapidly encroaching fire. Escape routes were cut off by the inferno, and the life-saving equipment, even if accessible, would have been of little use against such an overwhelming conflagration. The few available photographs from the aftermath, mostly of the charred, still smouldering hulk of the Doña Paz, only hint at the terror. Desperate passengers were forced to leap into the burning, oil-slicked waters, choosing the unknown terror of the sea over the certainty of the flames. The waters themselves offered little respite as the burning oil slick spread, creating a deadly trap. Rescue efforts were tragically slow to mobilize, hampered by the remote location, the darkness, and the sheer scale of the disaster, which was not immediately comprehended by authorities. By the time help arrived, it was far too late for the vast majority of those aboard both vessels. The official death toll for the Doña Paz tragedy is listed as 1,749, but due to the severe overcrowding and unmanifested passengers, the true figure is widely believed to be over 4,000 souls, possibly as high as 4,386. Only a mere 26 survivors were pulled from the water. The scarcity of photographic or video evidence from the event itself contributes to its somewhat lesser-known status, globally compared to other maritime disasters, yet its human cost is almost unparalleled. The Doña Paz stands as a horrifying testament to the dangers of overcrowding, lax safety regulations, and the catastrophic potential when passenger vessels and volatile cargoes meet in tragedy. Our narrative now transports us to the foggy night of July 25, 1956, in the busy shipping lanes off Nantucket, Massachusetts. Here, two grand ocean liners on converging courses were heading towards a fateful rendezvous. One was the Italian line's SS Andrea Doria, a vessel renowned for its luxurious appointments and considered a masterpiece of post-war Italian shipbuilding, inbound for New York. The other was the Swedish-American line's MS Stockholm, outward bound from New York. Both were equipped with radar, a relatively new technology intended to prevent such encounters, yet a combination of factors, including the dense fog and disputed navigational decisions, would lead to disaster. In the thick, disorienting fog, and despite both ships detecting each other on radar, a series of misinterpretations and last-minute maneuvers failed to avert a collision. The ice-strengthened bow of the Stockholm, designed to cope with harsh North Atlantic conditions, struck the Andrea Doria's starboard side with tremendous force, penetrating deep into its hull near the engine room. The impact was catastrophic for the Italian liner, creating a massive, gaping wound that immediately caused a severe and uncontrollable list. Newsreel cameras, though not present at the moment of impact, would soon capture the dramatic aftermath. Aboard the Andrea Doria, scenes of confusion and terror unfolded. Passengers were jolted from their sleep or evening activities as the ship lurched violently. The immediate severe list made launching lifeboats on the port side impossible and complicated efforts on the starboard side. Power failures plunged parts of the ship into darkness. However, in stark contrast to some other disasters, the crew of the Andrea Doria, despite the dire situation, largely maintained discipline and worked to assist passengers. The distress calls sent out were quickly answered by numerous vessels in the vicinity, initiating one of the largest and most successful peacetime sea rescues in history. The MS Stockholm, though severely damaged with a crumpled bow, remained afloat and remarkably stable. She even played a role in rescuing some of the Andrea Doria's passengers. Other ships, including the famed Ile-de-France, diverted to the scene, their lights cutting through the fog to illuminate a dramatic tableau of rescue. Newsreel footage from the era, along with striking photographs, captured the desperate efforts. Lifeboats shuttling between the stricken liner and rescue ships, passengers being helped aboard, and the Andrea Doria herself listing ever more precariously, her elegant lines marred by the gaping wound. 11 hours after the collision, after a valiant struggle and the successful rescue of most of her passengers and crew, the SS Andrea Doria finally succumbed. In a dramatic and widely photographed and filmed sequence, the once proud liner rolled onto her starboard side and sank beneath the waves, her stern rising high, before disappearing into the Atlantic. 51 lives were lost as a direct result of the collision, most on the Andrea Doria, and several on the Stockholm. The sinking of the Grand Dame of the Sea, captured in iconic images, highlighted the fallibility of technology and human judgment, even on the most sophisticated vessels of the day, but also showcased extraordinary heroism in the face of disaster. We now cast our gaze back to the turbulent era of the First World War, to May 7th, 1915, off the southern coast of Ireland. Here, the RMS Lusitania, a British ocean liner renowned for its speed and luxury, and one of the largest passenger ships in the world, became a tragic casualty of the escalating conflict at sea. She was en route from New York to Liverpool, carrying nearly 2,000 passengers and crew, sailing through waters that Germany had declared a war zone. Despite warnings issued by the German embassy in the United States about the dangers of transatlantic travel on Allied ships, many aboard felt secure, believing the liner's speed was its best defense. Unbeknownst to those on board, the German U-boat U-20, commanded by Captain Lieutenant Walter Schwieger, was patrolling these very waters. The submarine spotted the Lusitania and, with chilling efficiency, fired a single torpedo. The projectile struck the liner on its starboard side, triggering a massive secondary explosion deep within the hull, the cause of which remains a subject of historical debate, possibly coal dust, ammunition or other volatile materials. This second, much larger blast sealed the Lusitania's fate, causing catastrophic damage and initiating a rapid, uncontrollable sinking. The speed with which the Lusitania succumbed was terrifying. Within a mere 18 minutes of the torpedo strike, the massive liner had disappeared beneath the waves. The severe list to starboard, caused almost immediately by the explosions, made the deployment of lifeboats exceptionally difficult. Many boats capsized upon launching, or were damaged, and the chaos on the tilting decks was immense. Passengers and crew were faced with an almost instantaneous life-or-death struggle, with little time to comprehend the unfolding horror. The few photographs taken by survivors from lifeboats and later illustrations would attempt to convey the appalling scene. The sinking of the Lusitania resulted in the loss of 1,198 lives, including 128 American citizens. The tragedy provoked widespread international outrage, particularly in the United States. News reports, often accompanied by stark headlines and poignant images of survivors and bodies being brought ashore in Queenstown, now Cove, Ireland, fanned the flames of anti-German sentiment. The event played a significant role in shifting public opinion in America, contributing to the eventual decision of the United States to enter the war against Germany 2 years later, although it was not the sole cause. The Lusitania's demise remains one of the most controversial maritime events of the 20th century. Debates continue over whether the ship was carrying undeclared munitions, thereby making it a legitimate military target, and over the ethics of unrestricted submarine warfare. Regardless of these arguments, the sinking, captured in the public imagination through powerful contemporary accounts, photographs of the aftermath, and later historical analysis, stands as a stark example of how civilian populations can become ensnared in the brutal realities of modern warfare, and how a single swift act at sea can have profound geopolitical consequences. Our journey now leads us to the coast of West Africa, specifically to the waters off Gambia, on a stormy night in September 2002. Here the Senegalese government-owned ferry MV Joola embarked on its regular voyage from Ziguinchor in the Casamance region to the capital Dakar. This vessel was a lifeline for many, providing an essential transport link. However, on this fateful journey, it was catastrophically overcrowded. Designed to carry around 580 passengers and crew, it is believed to have been carrying close to 2,000 people, a recipe for disaster should anything go awry. The Joola sailed into increasingly rough seas and strong winds, conditions that would test any vessel, let alone one so severely overloaded and reportedly suffering from maintenance issues. In the midst of the storm, the ferry capsized with terrifying swiftness, rolling over and trapping hundreds of passengers within its hull. There was little warning and almost no time to react. The sheer number of people crammed onto its decks and into its cabins meant that escape was virtually impossible for the vast majority once the vessel began to keel over. The darkness of the night and the fury of the storm compounded the horror. The scale of the disaster was not immediately apparent to the outside world. Rescue efforts were agonizingly slow to materialize, with the first proper assistance arriving many hours after the ferry had overturned. By then, it was far too late for most. Fishermen in the area were among the first to reach the scene, heroically saving a small number of survivors who had managed to cling to the upturned hull or floating debris. The images that eventually emerged, showing the keel of the Joola starkly visible above the waves, surrounded by a vast, empty ocean, spoke volumes of the isolation and the hopelessness of the situation. The loss of life was staggering, one of an almost unimaginable scale for a single ferry sinking. It is estimated that at least 1,863 people perished, although the true figure may never be precisely known due to the lack of accurate passenger manifests. This death toll surpasses even that of the Titanic. There were only around 64 survivors, a tiny fraction of those who had embarked with hopes of reaching Dakar. The news footage of these few exhausted survivors being brought ashore and the anguished cries of relatives awaiting news conveyed the profound grief that enveloped Senegal. The sinking of the MV Joola stands as one of the worst maritime disasters in history, second only to the Doña Paz in terms of peacetime loss of life. Investigations pointed to a combination of factors: severe overcrowding, poor weather, and potential defects in the vessel's seaworthiness. The tragedy exposed significant failings in maritime safety enforcement and regulation. The haunting images of the upturned hull and the sheer, overwhelming number of victims serve as a brutal reminder of the consequences when basic safety principles are ignored and when the lives of ordinary people are so tragically undervalued in the pursuit of passage. For our final account, we move from the vast oceans to the largest lake in Africa, Lake Victoria, a vital waterway for the communities that line its shores. It was here on May 21st, 1996, that the Tanzanian ferry MV Bukoba met its tragic end. The Bukoba was on an overnight journey between Bukoba and Mwanza, the lake's main port city. Like many ferries operating on inland African waters, it was a critical mode of transport for local populations, carrying passengers, goods, and livestock. And, like many such tragedies, it was dangerously overloaded. The MV Bukoba, designed to carry approximately 430 passengers, was reportedly carrying well over twice that number, with some estimates suggesting close to 1,000 people were on board, along with excessive cargo, including crates of beer and bananas. As it neared Mwanza, in calm conditions but with a noticeable list due to the imbalanced load, the ferry capsized suddenly and sank within minutes. The speed of the capsize gave those on board, many of whom were asleep below decks, virtually no chance of escape. The placid waters of the lake quickly became a scene of unimaginable horror. Local fishermen and small boats were the first to respond, rushing to the site where the ferry had disappeared, marked only by floating debris and desperate survivors clinging to anything that would float. They pulled whomever they could from the water, but their efforts, though heroic, were dwarfed by the scale of the catastrophe. Official rescue operations were slower to get underway, hampered by a lack of adequate equipment and resources for a disaster of this magnitude. The initial news reports, often accompanied by grainy local television footage, began to paint a grim picture of a massive loss of life. The recovery efforts in the days that followed were harrowing. Divers, including some from South Africa who were brought in to assist, worked to retrieve bodies from the submerged wreck. The sight of hundreds of victims being brought ashore cast a pall of grief over Mwanza and the entire nation of Tanzania. The final official death toll was 894, making it one of Africa's worst maritime disasters. The images of the recovery and of the mass burials that had to be organized were deeply distressing and broadcast the tragedy to a shocked international community. Investigations into the sinking of the MV Bukoba pointed squarely at chronic overloading and the poor condition of the aging vessel as primary causes. The tragedy highlighted systemic issues with maritime safety standards and enforcement on Lake Victoria, a waterway crucial to the livelihoods of millions. The government faced criticism for its oversight, and the disaster led to calls for stricter regulations and better resources for maritime safety. The memory of the Bukoba, captured in the sorrowful images of its aftermath, serves as a somber warning about the devastating human cost when essential transport services are allowed to operate beyond the limits of safety, turning a routine journey into a national tragedy. The images and accounts we have revisited today are a profound testament to the unpredictable and often merciless nature of the sea, and indeed of large bodies of water. From the icy North Atlantic to the warm waters of the tropics, from colossal liners to humble ferries, The stories of these maritime disasters, captured by the lens, remind us of the thin veil that separates human ambition from the raw power of the elements. Each photograph, each frame of footage, whether professionally shot or captured by those caught within the maelstrom, serves as an indelible record of loss, of bravery, and of the critical lessons learned in their wake. These maritime disasters serve as a stark reminder of the power of the sea and the importance of safety measures. The echoes of these tragedies have, in many instances, spurred vital changes in maritime law, in ship design, and in emergency procedures, all aimed at preventing such horrors from recurring. Yet the ocean and our Great Lakes remain domains that command our utmost respect and vigilance. The stories of those who perished and those who survived, documented through the unflinching gaze of cameras, must not be forgotten, for they carry with them the weight of experience and the impetus for continued improvement in how we interact with these mighty waters. As we conclude our journey through these harrowing events, let us carry forward not only the memory of the lives lost, but also a renewed appreciation for the courage of rescuers and the resilience of the human spirit in the face of overwhelming adversity. The sea will continue to call to us, to challenge us, and to sustain us. May we navigate its vast expanses and those of our inland waters with wisdom, humility, and an unwavering commitment to safeguarding every life entrusted to their care. Thank you for watching, and stay safe out there.